one of the funnest parts of the book was retracing the steps of their romantic courtship, and of course that led up to the engagement. It was fun to really go back and look at the venue in which that they first met for the first time. I think there was some confusion about this first date, that perhaps it was just a one-on-one situation, and I thought it was quite sweet to hear that they actually had other friends present, that they were perhaps both a little unsure of how the evening might go, and you always want that comfort of knowing there are other people nearby. But of course, what
was it one person that set him up, or was it sort of like a group of people that put him together?
Well, Harry and Meghan are actually very private about who it is that set them up. I think Meghan's words to a close friend, who they don't even know who it was that set them up, was that the first encounter was serendipitous. So take from that what you will. But we do know that friends like Marcus Anderson and Misha Nunu were very much involved in those early days. These were the friends that helped keep that secret for so long and really helped them move around different parts of the UK and around the world without anyone finding out that they were an item for several months.
And is it true they Googled each other when they found out they were going to be meeting?
I mean, what couple or potential couple in this day and age doesn't have a quick look online? I think Harry was aware of Meghan through some of the pictures that he had seen on her Instagram. Of course, I think that's kind of the go-to move these days, is to see a little bit more of someone on social media. I think Meghan was careful not to really go diving in deep into tabloid stories, and of course there's a lot of mistruths out there, but she had an idea of who Harry was. But I think the biggest and most important thing to her was he a real, genuine person? Was he a gentleman? And I think the fact that that first date went by, there was no kiss on that first date, really
I love
shows
that there
us
was no kiss, right? That they just connected, but they Googled, tell me about the silver dress that he liked, his thoughts of his first moment he laid eyes on Meghan.
Well, there was a silver dress that was actually designed by Misha Nonu that she had proudly posted a photo of on her Instagram account. And that was one of the images that Harry had seen of Meghan before he met her. And I think immediately he knew, and I think his words to his friend was that she is incredibly beautiful, and she certainly lived up to expectations. I would say it's fair to say that he fell for her pretty quickly, because it's not often you invite someone to come to you to Botswana within just sort of 48 hours of meeting.
Well, and she fell for the flame-haired foxhound too. We know that. Okay. How did they keep all their dates so undercover? Because by the time we found out about it, of course, they'd been dating for a while.
Yeah, they really had that luxury of getting to know each other without prying eyes around them. And I think that that's really how their relationship was able to get to a strong point before they shared it with the world. Both of them obviously knew that it was inevitable that word would get out there, but it was important to keep some of that secret. And so what we reveal in the book is some of the dates that friends like Marcus Anderson helped set up, you know, little countryside retreats. And of course, friends like Jessica and Ben Mulrooney, who helped the couple hide away at their Toronto home during some of the moments where they were hiding out from the press. And I think what we really see throughout the book is this constant solid circle of friends around them that really stick up for them, that look out for them. We often hear a lot of tabloid talk about Meghan moving on from friends very quickly and that she's sort of a social climber of sorts. But actually, when you look at the circle around both of them, these are friends from their school days, from their university years, or in her case, her university years. And of course, the people that they've gotten to know through their work. And I think those people are almost ride or die for Harry and Meghan. And that's something that is hard to find, especially when you're someone in such a high profile position. Do you think they
miss that, Omid? Hearing you talk about that time in their life, and I look where they are now, do you think they missed that special moment that was just special between the two of them? The world didn't know yet.
I think the magic with them is always when they're able to get away from prying eyes and enjoy those private moments together. And if anything, that's what this strange period that we find ourselves now with the global pandemic has provided. They've been able to really shutter themselves away from the world and enjoy those sort of like private and personal family moments together. It was really fun to find out how they had celebrated their wedding anniversary this year in lockdown over margaritas and Mexican takeout, and Meghan baking a birthday cake for Archie's first birthday. And these are the sort of those special moments that I think that maybe they wouldn't have if they were out and about getting on with the work. And in some ways, things happen for a reason, and it's why they're in such a great place now.
Oh, but they're just like us with the margarita, with the royals. Let's talk about the engagement. So they were actually engaged before we knew about it. When we saw Meghan at the Invictus Games in the cute jeans and the white button down, We didn't know what had gone on.
Well, what was so funny about that Invictus event is that the shirt that she was wearing was called the husband shirt. And I remember at the time people saying, well, that's a bit presumptuous, but little did we know she already had the ring and they were engaged. And I think that says a lot about the circle that they're a part of, that people are really able to keep secrets for them and help really shield them away from some of the intrusions that we've seen over the years. I think that special moment in Botswana under the stars where Harry makes that promise to Meghan to always be by her side and make her his wife, that was quickly followed by the ring over roast chicken, a story we all know about. But the fact that it happened so much sooner, I'm sure was a really fun time for them because they had the biggest story in the world in their pockets and nobody knew about it.
I like to think that's Princess Diana shining down, like guiding them, right? Keeping that good stuff private. Now, Meghan didn't meet the Queen till after the engagement. How did that go?
Well, yeah, I had heard from a source that there had been a very quick encounter with the Queen, but that official meeting, of course, was much later on. It was a time when I'm sure, like anyone meeting Her Majesty for the first time, I know I was nervous. I'm sure Meghan would have been feeling the nerves, but if there's one thing that Meghan's proved herself pretty good at, is holding a great conversation and having the gift of the gab, as we say. And so, as we hear from Harry and heard from himself during the engagement interview, they got along very well, and they had that sort of like cosign from the royal corgis as well, which I think is a big thumbs up, really.
You could tell when they would sit next to each other too, that it really was mutual and what the press was trying to make of it. I think you could feel, is that connection genuine?
Absolutely. And even where this book leaves off, Harry and Meghan have really enjoyed a very close relationship with the Queen. I know that Harry checked in on his grandmother several times throughout the pandemic. They've been all speaking very regularly. And even before she addressed the nation here in the UK, before we went into lockdown, he called her to wish her good luck and just see how she was feeling. And I think that that shows that despite Harry and Meghan's feelings towards the institution of the monarchy, their feelings towards the likes of Prince Charles and Her Majesty the Queen herself are still one of great warmth and respect.
Because that's just family, right? Strip away the duty, and it's still your grandmother and your dad. And I love how much he loves family. The training that Meghan had to go for to be a royal. Tell me about that. Take me inside.
Well, unlike Kate, there wasn't the same level of training for Meghan as a future member of the royal family. And partly that's to do with the fact that Meghan will never be a Queen consort one day. But of course, there is a lot of protocol to undertake, and especially when it comes to security. I think it's fascinating when you hear about some of the training you have to undergo before marrying into the royal family, whether that's kidnap or hostage situations or being able to drive a car in hot pursuit. These are things that actually take place at an SAS base not far from London, and all members of the royal family have experienced. But with Harry and Meghan, that happened much earlier on in their relationship, and that's because of a lot of the security threats they received as a couple. There were a lot of nasty messages sent to the palace press or the palace post room, including some really worrying threats. And so I think the feeling was to get Meghan prepared early on, should anything, God forbid, ever happen.
How did she handle those threats?
I think there's nothing that shakes you up more than being on the receiving end of a death threat. And when we heard that Harry and Meghan had received that potentially lethal package of what looked like anthrax that came with a letter full of racist abuse, that was really the start of many incidents that followed like that. And it's why security has been so important for them. And so at the same time, when we hear the press talking about the couple having to spend so much on security, perhaps there's a lack of compassion there, because this is a couple that have genuinely faced some very scary situations and do need to be protected at all costs.
Now, William met Meghan first. How did the meeting go with Meghan and Kate? It's all about the women. The women need to get along.
The women do need to get along. And I think what was really unfortunate, that very quickly in the British tabloids, we had that narrative of the dueling duchesses, which unfortunately just fed into a lot of sexist tropes that we often attach to successful women, that they must have in some way be extra competitive with another and not get on. And the reality is that these were just two women that didn't have a lot in common. Whilst there was a mutual respect there was a friendship, that friendship never really went to a level of great depth or warmth. And I think it's something that Meghan, during some of the more difficult times with the press attacks and during her pregnancy, really would have hoped that someone like Kate, who was a newcomer at some point, would have been that shoulder of support to lean on. But Kate's someone that is very involved with her own family. She's a dedicated mum, a wife, and a future queen consort. She has a full plate. So you can't really blame anyone in that situation, but you can certainly understand why Meghan may have felt that way about Kate's lack of sort of an extended hand during the difficult times.
And I love Meghan, of course, as an actress and being involved with Hollywood. Is it true the palace had to have a talk with Oprah about their relationship? This is fantastic.
I found that so interesting because no one on earth should ever question Oprah's motives.
Right?
We always know that it comes from such a great place. And I remember hearing from a senior aide at one of the households that they had had a conversation with Oprah to make sure that her intentions with her friendship with Meghan and Doria came from a good place, that she wasn't just trying to get an interview. And now look, I think we've seen Oprah really prove herself to be a very respectful friend. She said very little about any of the Sussexes in that time. And listen, I think that shows just how protective the institution is of any newcomers coming in, no matter what your background.
When Archie was born, how did she notify her dad, Thomas, that we know is always surrounded by drama?
Well, I think at that point in Meghan's relationship with her father, when Archie was just born, she wasn't speaking to him. I think she had made every attempt that she could at repairing that relationship. Of course, after the letter she sent him that we all know about. So that letter that Thomas sent back to Meghan, really suggesting this media photo call, had just read the room in completely the wrong way. And I think was one of the final nails in the coffin for her relationship with Thomas, because of course, ever since then, he's continued to talk about their private business. And so she wanted him to know about the birth of Archie. And I think that because Doria was in London and Doria has some contact with Thomas on occasion, it was felt best that perhaps that message came from Thomas. But one of the things that a source said to me at the time was she didn't want to know what Thomas had to say in response. And I think there's a lot of hurt there, and time will really need to do its work if there's ever any chance of a relationship in the future.
Baby Archie is just the cutest. What are their nicknames for him?
Well, I think we've heard Harry and Meghan call Archie every name under the sun. Arch, Bubba. And I think what's so sweet about Harry and Meghan as parents is just how proud they are. I remember talking to a close friend of Meghan's who said that Meghan would often boast about how he was in the sort of 90th percentile of height for his age. Like it was a sort of grand award that she wanted to flex in front of her friends. And they're always very quick to pull out photos of Archie for their friends to see. Meghan's phone is filled with new pictures of him. And I think one of the things that really tickled me when I was talking to people that have been working with the couple more recently is that how much fun it is when Archie sort of climbs into the view of the webcam when they're having their meetings. And I think that just shows how they've sort of managed to find this great balance between their personal family life and their working lives. And it's all sort of existing together, I guess, much like it is for everyone in lockdown right now.
The wedding. Tell me about the secret reception, especially with all the Hollywood A-list that showed up.
Yeah, well, it was really fun to retrace that evening reception, which of course the media was kept well away from. And of course that was the big ticket. And I think one of my favorite details was George Clooney hopping onto a makeshift bar and serving out Casamigos shots to everyone, which I think if you've covered entertainment news for long enough, you know that that is very, very George. But I think it's great that they have such a diverse mix of friends around them. And moving to Hollywood at a time when they are so in demand, I'm sure they'll find it difficult to know who to trust. But having these friends that have been there since day one of their relationship will go a long way to help them.
And the Fab Four. Let's talk about William and Kate and Harry and Meghan. We touched on a little bit today, but how is their relationship today going on?
Well, I think very little has actually changed between the Sussexes and the Cambridges. And when we saw them at the Commonwealth service in March, you know, that was a very awkward moment. It happened in front of the camera.
Why was it so awkward? What happened there? What was with the seating and no one was looking their way?
It's a real shame, because I think at that moment, that was the opportunity for the royal family to put an extended arm around the couple and put all of their differences behind them and send them off on their way. You know, this is a family that are all about optics. And I think that for whatever reason, they had allowed their personal feelings to get in the way. Harry and William hadn't actually spoken or seen each other since the Sandringham summit at the start of the year. So it was a genuinely awkward moment for the pair of them. But what has changed, where the book leaves off, is the fact that Charles, of course, had his own battle with coronavirus. And I think sometimes it's moments like that that does bring families together. We did hear from sources that Harry and William have had conversations when dealing with the issues surrounding their father. Now, I think they're far away from being back to a place that they once were, but that distance is perhaps slightly less than it was a few months ago. And I'm sure as the time goes by, and we know that Harry's very close with his father and the Queen still, that ultimately family moments, family events will bring them together in some capacity.
What was it like when Harry had to go to the Queen to discuss him wanting to leave with Meghan?
There was a very memorable quote from a source that I spoke to that was involved in the Sandringham summit. And they said for Harry, he was very nervous. He didn't know whether behind that door would be his smiling grandmother or a very angry monarch. Because of course, Harry and Meghan had done this in such a public way. They had gone against all royal convention and tradition to really throw out their roadmap for the world. I think they had both reached a point of sheer frustration that they weren't being heard within the walls of the palaces, and they wanted to really start moving forward on what would be their new chapter. And so I think for Harry, it was a very nerve-wracking moment. He didn't have the support of his wife. She was back in Canada looking after Archie. And I think he really wanted to make sure that it was his family that was involved in this. And there was a moment during that summit where it was just family members in the room. Harry wanted to really keep things private. It's why you'll notice when you read the book, we don't actually go into the sort of meat and bones of the Sandringham summit itself. We sort of go in and we come out afterwards and sort of assess everything. But that private moment remains private. And I think that for Harry, one of his disappointments was after the family meeting, he was sort of left to deal with the rest with courtiers and aides. And these were many of the people that he felt had got in the way of what Harry and Meghan were trying to do within their roles as working members of the royal family. And I think that left a bit of a bitter taste in his mouth throughout that experience. I think there's a quote in the book where Harry likens the experience to sort of being in front of a firing squad, which sounds very dramatic, but I think it gives you an idea of how they felt at the time.
What about sort of all the blame, at least in the press, blaming Meghan for the exit, the Mexit?
Well, isn't it just so predictable that the woman takes all the slack for a big decision like this? I mean, what we have to really look at here is that Harry's a guy that grew up in this bubble. He knows the institution better than anyone else. And he also knows it through the eyes of his mother, who's been very vocal about the men in grey suits. He knew what he was up against when he brought Meghan into that. And I think he knew that if anything was to go wrong, he would pull her out of that situation as soon as possible. So when we really look at who was in the driver's seat, it was Harry, because as Meghan said to a friend, she had really given up everything to take on this role, and she was willing to continue doing that for the rest of her life. And so I think if Harry turned around and said, let's give it 5 more years, she probably would have supported that decision and remained. But ultimately that wasn't where it went, and here we are today.
And the Queen at the end came around and said, you're always welcome back home. Do you ever see Harry and Meghan moving back to England?
Well, I love that moment towards the end of the book where Harry meets his grandmother for a sit-down Sunday lunch, and that's where she reminds him that the door's always open for them. And what a source really went out of their way to point out to me was this was not the monarch speaking, this was just Granny. And that was so important for the two of them to sort of reconnect in that way before they moved on. That said, I can't imagine Harry and Meghan ever looking back. They're in a great place at the moment. They seem to really be thriving despite the circumstances that we're all in. They're very excited to get moving on the launch of their Archwell charitable foundation. I think family life is going really well for them too. So for a couple that really wanted to do things their way and bring a slight change to their roles, they've managed to achieve that. And we now see them louder and more vocal than ever about the issues that are really important to them.
You know them better than anybody. When is baby number 2 coming? I need another little baby.
That's if baby number 2 is even on the cards. I mean, we have to remember that Harry himself said that they would be quite happy with 3. And I think when you really look at the family unit that they have, it's the 3 of them and their 2 dogs. And of course, we now know that the mystery dog is called Poola. That's named inside the book as well. That's really their family unit right now. And that's where their happiness lies. And I think really that's what we see them focus on for the foreseeable future. Now, if a baby number 2 happens to make its way onto the scene, I think that they'll find that a beautiful surprise. But I don't think it's something that they're actively trying to make happen.